Welcome to the Irene Podcast. Today we have with us Trevor Cowley, and he's going to tell us a little bit about his story.
Well, thanks for having me. Yeah, my name's Trevor Cowley. I was born and raised in St. George, Utah, one of 7 kids. Grew up in a really poor environment. And I'm a big believer that your environment dictates how your life ends up. Like if we don't put ourselves in positive environments, most likely we're not going to have a positive life, right? And the hardest thing is to escape some of those negative environments, negative people. So when you grow up poor, what are the statistics of, being in that type of environment? The likelihood that you do terrible in school is extremely high. The likelihood that you go to jail at one point or another is extremely high. The likelihood that you get addicted to drugs is extremely high. Why? Because it's the environment, right? That environment produces those type of statistics. I'm a big data guy, and the data doesn't lie. It's our responsibility to utilize that data to our advantage and put ourselves in the best possible position to either turn our life around or just win in general and be successful in life. And let's just say I went down that list and I became a statistic of each one of those. I did terrible in school. Yeah, I have to help the stats be accurate, And yeah, by the time I was 13, I started smoking weed and drinking. Again, you grow up in that neighborhood, you look up to certain people, and usually in a bad neighborhood, the people that are 18, 19, 20 aren't usually the best leaders or people to look up to. But, that's what I had. And I was just emulating what they were doing because I was 13 and they were 18. They knew everything. They had a car, like they seemed like they had life figured out. And that's just what people in our neighborhood did. And so I succumbed to my environment and I went down that same path. And so obviously drinking and smoking weed at such a young age, I didn't really care about school anymore, right? That was kind of this school was just to meet up with friends so that we can then leave school and, do hood rat stuff with my friends. If you've seen that YouTube video, that clip, I just like doing hood rat stuff with my friends. And it was like, that was me at 13, so I get where he's coming from. But, that led to not graduating high school on time. I wasn't able to walk with my class, and now I'm starting to get data on myself that I'm an idiot. There's a system that says if you can't win in this system, the school system, then you're doomed.
You're a failure.
You're a failure. You're not going to win at life, right? Like out of 365 students in my graduating class, I was ranked 362. I don't know who the other 3 were. They probably transferred or just never came to school. So I felt like I was like, man, you're in last place. You don't really have hope. You don't have a chance at life, because everyone at that point, 20 plus years ago said you got to go to college. And I'm like, if I can't even get out of high school on time, there's no way I'm going to be able to be successful in life because I'm not going to be able to go to college. Or if I did, it would just be a waste of money because I'm not smart. My grades said, hey, you're not smart. This system says this is who you are. And I felt like to a certain extent, being at such a young age, you kind of look to those around you, whether it's teachers and some of the people, and it's like they were giving me that type of evidence that I just, I had no hope. And after I got out of high school, I started landscaping a little bit. One of my buddies, when I was hanging out with him, said, dude, come get a sales job with me. And I'm like, no, I don't. I always envisioned myself, because I wasn't going to go to school, driving by construction sites, I would see the guys doing their work. Like that's going to be me. If you don't go to college, then you go into the trades or go into construction or, be a grunt worker is what I thought I was. And I was like, man, I don't know about sales. And he's like, dude, what's the worst thing that can happen? What, you go back to landscaping? Like you're already in your worst case scenario right now. You can't tell me that they don't need somebody to dig trenches or lay sod 6 months from now. Like they'll take a grunt anytime, and that's really all you are. And so I was like, I said, how much do you make? And he was like, I'm making anywhere from $1,500 to $2,500 a week. And I was 19 years old. And I was like, this might be my way out. This might be my opportunity to actually see success and be successful in life. And so I said, what the heck, I'll give it a shot. So I gave it a shot, and I was really good at it and started making really good money. But in the call center type environment, it's like Wolf of Wall Street or Boiler Room, you know, like that type of, it was like, I was just over the phone making phone calls and selling people. The problem with that is it was a bunch of degenerates just like me that can't create opportunities for themselves outside of sales. So it's like by default, we just went into sales because we really aren't good at other things. And again, it was the same situation. I was put in an environment where, one, there was money that was being made, which was awesome, and I started making money. But I also was put in an environment with people that were a little bit older than me, 25 to 30, that I thought had life figured out. They drove an Escalade or something nice. And so here I am again, looking up to these type of people. Little did I know that some of these people have drug addictions. On the outside, it all looked pretty like they had it figured out. And there was a time that somebody came up to me and said, "Hey man, you want to get in the phone zone?" And I said, "What's that?" And he's like, "Bro, if you want to get in the zone and make more sales, take this." And he handed me a pill. And I said, "What is that?" And he says, "It's an Oxycontin." And I said, "What's an Oxycontin?" He says, "Well, it's a painkiller. It's just kind of like a Loratab." And in high school, messing around with my buddies, we could take a little Loratab 5, have a couple beers or whatever when we were partying, and it was no big deal. So to me, it wasn't some big crazy thing. It was like a Loratab. Back in those days, 22, 23 years ago, Oxycontin was new to the market, and there wasn't a lot of information like there is now about it. And here I am, young, naive, looking up to, again, the wrong person. And they offered me to get in the zone, which is what they do, and they make a bunch of money. So I'm like, okay, well, if I want to be like them, then I need to do what they do, And so he broke me off a little piece, and I took some of it, and I felt really good and kept going back to him and said, "Hey, man, I want to get in the zone." And my sales continued to climb and go up because I was feeling really good, really relaxed. I wasn't high pressure or pushy. I was calm and no anxiety. It was just flow. I was flowing when I was on the phone. So I got what he said when he said phone zone. The problem is it got to the point about 6 months later that my sales started to dip, and my mindset and everything that I thought about was geared around getting that pill. So now I was just trying to show up to work to get hooked up,
to get your fix,
to get my fix. And so my priorities changed. I wasn't there to get in the phone zone. I was there to make sure that I wasn't going through pain. So at first I would get high and get in this elevated state, but eventually it got to the point where I would be at a low, and when I got high, it brought me back to baseline, to where I was functioning, but I wasn't necessarily getting high.
Getting back to that
I wasn't getting, we're always chasing the dragon, so to speak, with addiction. We want to feel what it felt like at one point, right? But by the time you get to the point of becoming a full-fledged addict, you wake up at a low and you need that to get baseline. When you first start, you're at baseline and you get high, right? So in order for me just to function, I needed it. And then a few short months later, I was, again, 19. I had like 10 grand saved up, and I was constantly going to the ATM, pulling out money, not necessarily checking my statements, but it got to the point where I pulled out money and I said, "Yeah, I want to check my statement," and print it out. And there was like $500 left. So I was burning through everything that I was making, and then my savings was also dwindling. And so it got to the point where really I didn't have any more money. I didn't have any more reason to go into work. And when you run out of money, there's other options, right? People will say, "Hey, if you shoot up this pill, because you can boil it and do some things or whatever, and you can put it in a mixture and you could shoot it up." I said, "No, I'm not a crackhead. I won't do that." That lasted for about a month or two until I got so desperate that they said, "You get a bigger bang for your buck, and if you're hurting financially, you could take this pill and you could crack it in half, and you'll get just as high as you did ingesting the full amount." So it was a desperation ploy or idea to say, Yeah, chasing it for cheaper is really all I was doing because it was the situation that I was in. So I succumbed to the idea based upon the pressure of my financial situation. So then I started shooting up, painkillers. And then a few months later, maybe 4 or 5 months, somebody said, hey, did you know heroin's way cheaper than Oxycontin? And I said, I'm never doing heroin. I'm not, like that. To me, I understood heroin because as a youngster, that was like, talked about. It's a bad. I didn't understand Oxycontin because that was never talked about, right? But I succumbed to that too, because I could get for $10 what it would take $30 to $40 for me to get out of a pill.
Yeah, and that addiction is so heavy. It's like all consuming your thoughts, right? It's everything that you
every
can
day,
think about
all
just
day.
to be able to function. So now you're at a point where you can't even live without it.
I can't.
Especially in your mind.
Yeah. Every day I woke up, it was the first thing I thought about. Anytime I communicated with somebody, it was about, do you have it? Do you want to go to Vegas today and do a trip? Because that's where we would go. We would run down to Vegas, and there was like the Mexican mafia is what we called them. The guy that we met up with didn't really even speak English, and he was just one of their runners. And, one of my buddies in town that's now passed away from drug addiction. He passed away 5 or 6 years ago, but he was selling. And so I kind of became his right-hand man because he had what I wanted, and he needed somebody to go back and forth to Vegas with him, and I didn't have a job. So now I'm helping him out, getting hooked up a little bit on the side, and then I would sell some on the side to try to support my addiction. So I was just kind of helping him just to get by on a day-to-day basis, not necessarily make money. I just wanted to get mine, right? To cover the addiction. Pain. Yeah, to take away the pain. I mean, it got to the point where sometimes heroin or pills weren't around, and I would shoot up meth, I would shoot up cocaine, I would shoot up whatever you had. Obviously, drug of choice was heroin, but at the end of the day, in reality, I was an escape artist, just trying to escape reality, escape, feeling. So at least this will make me feel something other than what I'm currently feeling, right? No matter what it was. And it got pretty rocky there for, roughly 4 years or so. So the pills happened at 19. By the time I was 20, I was a heroin addict shooting up. And, I tried different rehabs and things like that. And, my mom and stepdad would sit down and talk to me. They knew kind of what was happening. And I would tell them all the right things. As an addict, I'm like, yeah, I want to quit. Yeah, I know. Yeah, I'm gonna. You just tell them what they want to hear so that they just go away, right? That's what addicts do, right? They'll just be like, they're perfect manipulators. They're going to manipulate you into believing exactly what they want you to believe. And they're going to try to make it be your idea. Like you said, we really are concerned. I know, I need to quit. Like, what they're looking for in that conversation. So you give it to them so that you can end it, because you're not going to sit there and fight about, no, I want to stay an addict. No addict really wants to be an addict. They really don't.
Or admit it to the people that are trying to help them. Like, you don't admit that you have this huge problem. You just kind of go along with it and then go about your day doing what you've always been doing.
Yeah. And it got to a point where they caught me. I would take heroin and I would put it, they have a block wall. They're on a main road just down the street here in Washington Fields, but there's a speed limit sign on the other side of the wall next to that main road. So I would put drugs right there and put them under a rock and tell whoever, just put the money under the rock, so that I wasn't really making the exchange, so that my parents didn't see people pulling up at the front yard or whatever. So I'm like, do it at the side of the house, put the money. And I went around the block wall to go get the money, and my stepdad was right there. And he's like, I got that dude's license plate number, all this. Like, I know what you're doing. Like, I haven't heard him curse that much. They're good Christian people, but I heard him swear. And that was the most heated that I had seen him. I had already wrecked their car at this point, lying to them that I was getting job applications, but I was running to Vegas to get drugs. And they would say, hey, why is there so many miles on the car? And I would create another lie. I went to Hurricane, all this stuff, just lies. My whole life was just lies. And, in that moment, he just said, I can't have you here anymore. And then my mom came home, roughly like 30 minutes later, and she's crying, and she's just like, we can't have you live here anymore. You've got to go. And I was like, okay. And I walked out the front door, and at that time, this is 17, 18 years ago. Cell phones they were there, but some people had them, some people didn't. I didn't have a cell phone, obviously. Didn't have a car. Didn't even have a nickel in my pocket. I walked out the front door and was just walking down the street. It's about a month before I turned 24 years old, and I'm walking down through Washington Fields asking myself, where am I going? Like, what am I doing with my life? Then I'd watch people drive by me, and I'd see a husband, a wife, and young kids in the back seat. And I'm like, these are people my same age that are married, they have kids, they're graduating colleges, like they're doing all the things that they should be doing. And here I am walking down the street a month away from turning 24, having no idea where I'm going to sleep tonight, homeless, right? And it was quite an eye-opening experience, because that was my rock bottom. That was kind of my low. So here I am walking down the road, me asking life-altering questions. Right? And I just don't think enough people put themselves in situations or ask themselves life-altering questions. It's like we would prefer just to live the same day as yesterday so that we don't have to spend the energy that we don't have trying to change. And if we ask ourselves those questions and we find an answer that we don't like, it requires usually doing a lot of work, right? And most people will avoid asking themselves questions that require them to do work or exert more energy than what they feel like that they have in the moment. Because when you really need to change, you're usually at a low spot, which means low energy. And the even the thought of changing just becomes overwhelming, and it's just easier just to stay as is or stay in your situation than it is to, try to plan all this. This is how I'm going to change, and really, I think that's the biggest issue is people want all of the answers before they start moving in a certain direction. When in reality, you have to move in that certain direction prior to having the answers, and the answers become a little bit more clear as you're on the path. But so my mom pulled up about 1.5 miles to 2 miles down the road. Perfect amount of time for me to really do some soul searching and see how other people were living, because I was high. I didn't care about how other people were living, but in that moment, I was just kind of taking in everything, and really,
your whole world had just shifted. From comfort and having a place to live and food on the table to now, I got to figure it all out by myself, and I have
no money, no car, what are you doing? Yeah. I mean, I at that point I was trying to walk to a gas station to call a friend. Yeah. Hey, like, come pick me up. I need a place to stay or something was kind of my idea. And she pulled up next to me, rolled the window down and said, I'm going to give you one more chance. Do not get in this car unless you're absolutely ready to change. And that was like my lifeline. I needed that time alone. I needed the rug to be pulled out from under me. I needed to have nothing to finally really, really take it serious and say, I need to do something about this. And I got in the car and we decided to do a little camp trip, a little camp outing. And we went, it's a place called Marysville. It's a town, if you blink, you're in and out of it. Yeah, it's, a couple hundred people. So we went into the mountains of Marysville, which is a couple hours from where I'm at, and I just went through withdrawals in a camp trailer, throwing up, and, both ends were, working very well, a little too well. Skin crawling, aches and pains, all that fun stuff. But when I was curled up in a ball in a camp trailer on a mountain, there was no way out. My mom had a cell phone, but there was no cell service up there. We were so far out that no matter the amount of pain that I was in, I'm no mountain man, that's for sure. And so I'm not going to just go off into the mountains and try to hike out of there or there was just no escape. And I'm a big believer in creating the environments that are conducive to the results that you want in life. Like I had to create an environment in which there was no escape, where I had to go there and do this thing. My mom's not taking me off that mountain, no matter how much pain I'm going through.
And clearly your mom is kind of in the same mindset as you right there.
Yeah.
She's like, if I take him out to the mountains,
there's no way out.
There's no one he can call. There's nowhere he can go. There's
He's going to finally have to face this thing.
He has to.
Yeah.
So work through that.
And so when I was going through the deepest, darkest moments, I just told myself, I will never do anything that puts me through this much pain ever again. And when I came off that mountain, that was the last of that. You know, I didn't really look back, and cut off tons of friendships, relationships, and that's one of the hardest parts. That's why you stay in crappy situations. Is it's almost like at least you have people in your life.
Yeah.
You know,
it's what you know, it's what you've done. So staying there, that's easy.
It's a difficult thing to do, but it's the difficult that you know, rather than going through difficulty alone. Yeah. You know, feeling alone, feeling isolated. Where am I gonna go? What am I gonna do? Like, you know, you're like, there's so many unanswered questions when you get clean or you leave a situation and you're trying to create a new life. It's like you have 100 options. Which, like, should I go into cells? Should I go do this? Should I go that?
Like, you were an addict for 6 years straight. So like, that was all you did, all you knew, all you had for all that time. And now that you've made this break, so to speak, you have to like reinvent yourself. You have to become a different person than you've been for the past 6, 7, 8 years. Yeah. So now it's like, even though you're like, okay, now I'm clean, but now you're like, there's more layers to that, more things that you have to overcome.
Oh yeah.
To stay on that course.
You just overcame one thing. Right? And that's only one obstacle on the path to better. You know, it's just making the decision that you want better, and then executing on that decision. Then you're going to be put in no man's land, where you're by yourself, and then you're going to have more obstacles. And that's kind of the overwhelming thought of change. It is constant obstacles. We're leaving what was and going in a path that's just unfamiliar. So everything's new and different, which means obstacles to most people. To me, I think new and different means opportunities for better. You know, and so how we look at things really, really does matter. You know, there's silver lining in every situation. I believe that certain things might appear negative on the surface, but it's probably the biggest blessing that you've ever been gifted. You don't have those rose-colored glasses where you're not looking for the positive. So by default, you just see what is. And again, on the surface, it appears to be negative, and so you just, that's negative or that's bad. I don't want to deal with that, or I don't want to do that, you know. And you know, that was a really pivotal moment for me coming off of that mountain, but I still wasn't healed or prepared, I guess, for life, because I just went to alcohol. You know, I watched all these people in their college. Drugs, so it's okay. That was kind of my thought process, right? Like, you can buy it at the store. You know, and I'm almost 24 years old, and I watched all these people go to college, parties, doing all that. I didn't have that life. So I was like trying to make up for lost time. So I found the party scene, and I was around people, and it was new people, and it was exciting, and it was different. I'm not saying it was positive. It was better than what was, but not positive.
To heroin anymore, you know, so I'm okay drinking.
But I mean, I have 4 DUIs on my record to show that, like, when I do something, like, I go all in. When I drink, I would drink till I black out, and I would be blacking out 3 or 4 times a week, you know, day after day. At that time, I did have a cell phone after I got clean and was working and, you know, partying, but I'd lose my cell phone, wake up, go to the cell phone store, get another cell phone, black out that night, lose my cell phone again, wake up, go to the cell phone store, you know. So it wasn't really healthy. And like, I'm a big believer that, like, self-awareness is super, super important to be successful. And there's a reason why 18-year-olds aren't self-aware. They don't have a lot of data about themselves. They've changed so much from the time that they were 0 to 18 that they really can't say, I'm just so self-aware. And it was like, I had to get a lot of data on myself in my 20s, a lot of negative data, on environments that I shouldn't be putting myself in, because the majority of the time that I got in trouble, it was with large groups of people after 10 o'clock at night with alcohol involved. As I got DUI after DUI after DUI, and I really didn't care about those and going in and out of jail a little bit here and there, because I was only affecting me, and I was way better than what I was. And so I'm like, it's not that big of a deal. I'll do 10 days here or there and still go party and do my thing. And it got to the point where, you know, I was working a sales job again, and I met my wife there, and she called me, you know, 3 or 4 months into the relationship and said, I'm pregnant. And I said, oh, F, you know, bad word. And she's, well, thanks for making me feel better, because I was only thinking about myself. There goes my party days. There goes all the things that I'm going to lose. In other words, my life again. You know, I was really like having a lot of fun. Obviously, the DUIs and the record showed it, and I was the life of the party and would get positive attention and, you know, all these things. And when she told me that, then I realized that like all my decisions no longer just affect me. And that's when it was like that all that now this version of you has to die. Now you have to create a new version of you, because you can't put, you know, your wife and a baby in a situation because of dumb decisions that you're in and out of jail that you can't provide. That wasn't the environment that I wanted to raise a family in. Even trying to quit drugs. I mean, that was one of the things. I was jealous of people having a family and establishing themselves, and that was right there in front of me at that point. And that's when I walked away, even from that group of friends that were the party friends and the still getting texts, man, let's go to Texas Roadhouse and blow it out tonight. I can't. I'd love to, you know, have 10 Long Islands with you, but I just set out on a completely new path of just hunkering down. And the reality of change is it's extremely difficult. It's extremely lonely. There's a ton of uncertainty. But for me, and the data that I now have on myself in those situations, only positive things come from you putting yourself in uncertain situations that you're unfamiliar with, because you're going to learn more about yourself in those situations.
Especially the more uncomfortable those situations might feel in that moment.
Yeah.
Because that's where you get to decide, am I going to go back to what I've always done, or am I going to sit in this and feel uncomfortable and then make a better choice for my future?
Like the whole world is distracted right now. Like I was telling my assistant this morning, right before this podcast, when I meet with her every Tuesday, and I said, you know, had a thought when I was running this morning about like social media anymore there's not a ton of people really engaging with people on social media. And I'm like, it's almost like equivalent to back in the day when we used to be bored and we'd get off the couch and we would go open the fridge and stare at it, and then we'd shut it, and then we'd sit back down, and 5 minutes later we'd get up and open the fridge. Nothing magically appeared in there that wasn't there 5 minutes ago, but it's like this zombie, not fully connected, not fully aware distraction.
But almost
right?
like a search for connection, but in the wrong places.
Yeah, but so I think people scroll social mindlessly, like we mindlessly used to go to the fridge and stare at it. Then they put it down. 5 minutes later, they're doing the exact same thing. It's just this repetitive mind numbing of nothingness. And so when I run a half marathon every single day. I'm in the process of breaking a world record. I don't listen to music. I don't listen to podcasts. I don't listen to anything, because I think it's extremely important to tap into self and to be alone. And I don't think enough people do that anymore. They utilize people or things or social media as a distraction from their situation. It's kind of like a numbing device at this point, and people aren't really leveraging and using it for positive. Like we follow all these people that are living great lives, cool lives, and all they're doing is putting their lives on display. Why aren't we following people that are positive, that are uplifting, that are inspiring? Like I've told people before, way back when I first started my podcast 6 years ago, I said, if you guys want a quick hack to change your mindset, set up a sub account on Instagram. You can have your personal account if that's what you want. That's all fine and dandy. But then set up a sub account. You don't have to post pictures or anything there. But follow 10 to 20 people that you know for a fact is only delivering positive, inspirational type content. because I'm a big believer of what goes in is what you see out here, right? Yeah. And so it's like if you're feeling down, like go to your sub account and just fill your mind with good information, positive, uplifting. Like everybody needs that. And so it's like, again, I'm creating an environment there in which can produce a result that I want if I'm down. So I have these little, my little safety nets, so to speak, or hacks that I would use. I mean, I got to the point where I wanted to change so bad, and like I got sick of watching other people. I'm guilty of everything that I'm talking about, so I'm not sitting here preaching. I'm telling a story, really.
You're sharing your experience.
And I know that I can't be the only one. Yeah. Like I've lived an average, mediocre, normal life. And I've also lived a very exceptional one. And I've lived a below average. I've lived every single one of those tiers. I know which one's good, which one's bad, and where I don't want to be.
You've leveled up from the bottom. Like a lot of people start, in this mediocre zone, and they're so comfortable because nothing hurts and nothing's hard and nothing's challenging that they don't know that you can always level up. It doesn't matter where you are. There's always an opportunity to level up.
Always. I live my life by that standard. Yeah. I believe in living a life of excellence. I believe that we're all examples to people. This podcast is geared around, people struggling with, creating a new life or leaving their old life, domestic violence, or, all of these things that are terrible situations. But it gets to a point where we really have to take ownership of our environments, our situations, our mindset. And like I said, like when I got sick of watching people on social media, like I would watch David Goggins run really far, and I'm like, a dopamine hit off of what he's doing, but I'm sitting on the couch and I just got my hit of dopamine for nothing. And I think that's the problem, is we're all getting too many free dopamine hits, and we forgot what it takes to earn, what we have. And the progress the process to progress or better is friction, period. Like you're going to have to, create friction between the person that you want to be and the person that you are, because the person that you are isn't going to want to be the person that you want to be, because it's going to, like I said, require work,
change,
discomfort, and change, and
that's the biggest
uncertainty thing, and all of these feelings that for whatever reason we label them as bad, when in reality it's like all of the facing fear, facing uncertainty, putting yourself in unfamiliar situations, creating friction. All of those things are positive things. That's how I live my life, where I create friction with myself every single day by waking up and running for hours every single morning, because I'm just a big believer of that alone time while suffering and creating friction, because I want to understand how I respond when it's the last thing that I want to do, but I know it's good for me and I committed to it. Will I still honor what I said I was going to do?
You will. And you know why? Because whenever we do something, I learned this a few years ago. I was 50 pounds heavier, and I was sitting at a computer all day, and I was doing nothing for my health. And I've always been an athlete and a healthy person. Yeah. But at this time, because of what we were doing, I was just sitting at a desk all day.
Idle.
Gained like 50 pounds.
Yeah.
I looked in the mirror one day, and I was like,
hell no, not today anymore.
And where does she come from?
Yeah.
And so I decided to do 75 hard. I don't know if you've heard of the 75 hard program, but it's just...
That's what I did, and that ultimately led to me breaking a world record right now.
I was not prepared for the amount of mental shift it was going to... I was looking for a physical change.
Yeah.
But I showed myself that by doing the hard thing every single day, day after day after day, because I actually did it for like 105 days straight, because I did 75 hard, and then I did the next month. And I get emotional because it changed my life. It changed how I thought about everything. It changed my physical body, but that was just like a minor detail.
Yeah.
What it did to my brain is it showed me, I learned from myself, making a commitment and sticking to that commitment.
Yeah.
That if I do the hard things day after day after day after day, those things become easy, and then the next thing that I want to do that's hard doesn't feel so hard, because I've already proven to myself that I can do hard things.
Yeah.
And so now I'm able to do things way outside my comfort zone without batting an eye, because I know that at the end I'm going to feel 1,000 times better, and I'm going to get 100 feet closer to my goal.
Oh, yeah.
So every little thing that's hard and I push through, it's just another story in my head telling myself that I can do anything.
Yeah.
I can do anything I put my mind to.
Yeah.
Because at 50 pounds heavier, I still worked out every single day, twice a day, one time outside when it's burning hot here in St. George, or when it's ice cold, 30 degrees.
Yeah.
It didn't matter.
Yeah.
I did it. I kept doing it, and I kept showing up for myself, and I proved to myself that I'm capable beyond what I thought I was capable.
What that also showed you is, regardless of anything going on external, you could still show up in the manner in which you committed to. If it's rainy, if it's cold, if it's hot, right? Like, there are always things that are unforeseen or outside of our control that will, again, appear negative, on the surface. Like, I remember, man, it's going to be raining tomorrow. I have to run in the rain, all this stuff. And it's like, well, if it's going to rain tomorrow anyways, like, why are you being negative about it? Because you're only making what you have to do anyways even harder than it needs to be by creating this thought and this anxiety and that it's a problem, rather than just succumbing to it and just do the doing rather than think about the doing. And so it's like, nowadays it's like, I look forward to the rainy days, because at least it gives me a curveball. It's something different. It's like, running every day, doing the same thing over and over. Like, now I get excited for snowstorms, or I get excited for rainstorms, because it's an opportunity for me to overcome something else, right? Because I can run if regular weather, whatever. Like, none of that. Give me friction. Give me hard. Like, pour it on. Throw in like, I was running the other morning and it was 24 degrees, and me and a couple of buddies were just running, and we were just laughing and stuff. And it's like, isn't it so funny that, like, we now hype each other up the worse the situation gets, where we actually get excited about overcoming it, because we have so much data on overcoming what appears to be bad or negative situations, that they weren't bad or negative. They were opportunities to grow and get better. So that now that we have that data, it's like, dude, it's going to rain on Friday. Let's get it in, And so it's like, let's put and then, I mean, it just sucks for 5 minutes as you're getting wet, but once you're wet, you're wet. Yeah. And it's just like, you stop making it a friction point, and you surrender to it, and you just do what you need to do, And I mean, I dedicated, after I got clean and had my child, I dedicated the next 12, 13 years to getting rich and building businesses, because I was going to have a family, and I grew up really poor, and that's unacceptable. It's not a standard that I'm willing to raise my kids in. And so I went, just like anything I do, whether it's heroin or running, I went all in. I went all in on business. And, after 11, 12 years, I became a millionaire. A year or two later, multi-millions. And I got to a point, I was 36 years old. It was June. My birthday's in July, and I was 36 years old. Call it a midlife crisis or whatever. I'm a big believer that a lot of people have midlife crisis in their mid to late 30s, because it's kind of like, well, you're not in your 20s anymore. You still kind of feel like a kid, and it's like, I think I should really now take adulting seriously. What happens when people have midlife crisis? Again, enter a distraction: drugs, alcohol, pornography, the sports car, the motorcycle, whatever it is that you could purchase externally or get without really having to do the internal work.
Get that dopamine hit.
Yeah. Like porn, dopamine hit. You can take the hit of drugs, take the hit of alcohol, buy the motorcycle when you're on it. All of it feels cool. But again, it's all unearned stuff. You're not really changing. You're distracting yourself from the person that you don't like anymore, which is who you are. That's why it's a midlife crisis, because your life is saying the person that got you here is no longer like acceptable if you want to keep going, or you can just settle in and have this just be your life. And most people at that point, again, they find, I know many people that I went to high school with while I was partying, using drugs, and they were saying things behind my back, all goody, I got it all out of my system. And now I'm 41 and I see, the missionaries and this that came back that hit their midlife crisis that are starting to dabble in alcohol and drugs and find these things that I found a long time ago, and they're finding it later in life. And so I'm so blessed that I blew it out at such a young, got it out of my system. Yeah. And I'm watching people go through their midlife crisis at 41 years old, in proximity from a distance. I don't really kick it or hang out with too many people because, again, I'm a big believer in curating environments that are in alignment with what I'm trying to do with my life. But it's just really, really sad. And so at that point, at 36, I'm like, man, I've just made good money. I finally accomplished everything that I thought would make me happy, but I still feel like that there's something missing.
Like, what's next for you?
Yeah, I was at an extremely low point. And so I was like, man, I can go buy the sports car, but I live debt free. I'm a penny pincher to the, even in my old neighborhood that I was in. I mean, I bought that house for like $250,000, and there was a year I made like 1.6 million while I was just sitting in a house that was like a $1,300 a month mortgage because I'm such a penny pincher. I just love stacking cash. I like my bank account to go in one direction, and and that's up unless it's an investment that has the ability to make me more cash, then I'll part ways with some of it. But I was just, bring back homies, please. Lots of them. So I was at this low spot, I'm like, okay, now what? I don't want to spend money because I'm a cheapskate. And I said, man, I really need to do something that the old version of me would never do. And I said, what do I hate doing? Running came to mind instantly. I think everybody can relate to that. They're like, running. No,
actually,
thanks.
I grew up running with my mom, and I love to run. And right now, since I moved here, I have asthma and some other stuff that makes it hard. Yeah. So I just turned to lifting weights.
Yeah,
so
I mean that's
was my new hard.
I was already lifting weights and stuff, so I was just like, I just needed something new, And so I was like, okay, well, I'm not a runner. That's kind of a weird one. What would I do? Run like 3.7 miles for my 37th birthday or whatever? I'm like, dude, that's too dumb. Like it's not a challenge. I'm not going to change who I am, in 3 miles, it's not going to give me the friction that I was really looking for, the suffering that I needed to anytime that I've suffered the most, it forces me to look inward, and it forces me to have that conversation with myself as well, to be my biggest hype man. To be my biggest cheerleader, right? Like, we have two sides of our mind, the heckler and the cheerleader. Too often we give an ear to the heckler, right? And I wanted to put myself in a situation where I would suffer, and I would have to communicate with myself in a positive way on why this is a good thing and why you should continue to go down a path that feels very uncomfortable. So I was like, 37 miles? I'm like, dude, there's no way. I have 39 days before my 37th birthday. I'm not a runner. I can't go from 0 to 37 miles. And I was like, you know what? Screw it. I walked into a room at my office where there was employees, opened the door and said, I'm running 37 miles on my 37th birthday. Had people look around like, what? You? Yeah,
but now that you said it out loud, you've told yourself, I don't want to look like a fool to everybody and myself, so I'm doing this.
I speak it into existence and create accountability, because I'm a big believer of honoring your word, and that you're only as good as your word. And if you say you're going to do something, unless you don't have a pulse anymore, you better figure out a way to follow through with what you said. So I heard a few chuckles, this, that, the other. I'm like, cool, that's all I needed. Just a couple doubters. Thank you, Sean. He trained for a marathon for 2 years. Something messed up in his Achilles in 2019. And then in 2020, COVID hit. So he was training. He couldn't do it. And I told him, I said, you're an idiot. You can walk out your front door and get 26.2 anywhere. You're just waiting for somebody else to throw an event to do it. Like, why are you waiting to do something that you've wanted to do? Like, I don't care if COVID happened. You could still go run a marathon. You can run a marathon. If you're trained to run a marathon, go do what you said that you were going to do. Yeah. You don't need somebody else to throw an event. You don't need a
start and finish line. You just go.
Create your own environment. Don't lean on somebody else's, like, oh, they're putting it on, so since it's canceled, I can't do it. It's like, no, that's not true. Again, that's a limitation in which he has that is going to force him to operate less than what he's capable of or what his potential is, because he's looking external. There's issues or problems. It appears that he can't do it, when in reality, if he looked inward, he could still do what he set out to do without having somebody else's support or help, like at an event. And so he chuckled because he knows how difficult it is, because he's been training.
Yeah.
And I said, it's all good, bro. We'll see. I went home that day and ran 3 miles and was like, oh,
times 11,
wow. I don't know.
12.
What did I commit to today? But I went in that room to say it out loud, because I think that we're all given downloads. I don't even really want to call it a thought. I think some things are downloads from God. And it just came out of nowhere, like 37 miles. Like, where did that come from? Like, I would never, that's not me. And I now scratch that curiosity itch when I have these weird downloads that most people would just label it crazy. No way. But if I would have went to bed that night and didn't say that to other people and just kind of thought about it, it wouldn't have happened. Yeah. I had to go speak it into existence, create accountability for myself, or else that thought would come and go, or that download would come and go, and I would be the same person the next day and maybe wake up, man, that was a crazy thought. Glad I didn't commit to that.
I think that's a fun way to play with your ego too. Yeah. You know, because like we all have ego and we need to keep ourselves in check sometimes, but sometimes it's good to use that ego to reach those goals. Like, I said this, so I'm going to do it, because I'm not going to look like a fool to all these people that doubt me. I'm going to prove them wrong. Well,
that's again, self-awareness, knowing yourself. I can't go out 10 o'clock with people with alcohol.
Yeah.
The data says, 4 DUIs is enough to say, no, there's something here. Those are the 3 commonalities between the DUIs.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's like, I believe your 20s is a great opportunity to just gather data. You know where you thrive. You know the environments that you shouldn't be in that have a higher likelihood of something bad happening, or you making a mistake or a bad decision. So I just stopped going into the environments that increased my probability of being a dummy or making bad choices. And I ended up training 10 times and I ran 37 miles. I started at midnight the second I turned 37 and ran for 9 hours and 30 minutes and literally kissed the ground at mile 37 because I was really happy to see it.
And you taught yourself another lesson, because I feel like every time, even if we go, I know I'm capable of this, it's going to be hard, I'm going to struggle, even though you know that about yourself and you knew that you were going to reach that 37 miles no matter what, you still taught yourself another thing about yourself, that like, I still have it. I still am able to push myself past maybe some of my limiting thoughts and reach that goal that I spoke that I was going to reach.
Well, what it also does is it gives you data to say, like, so you're telling me I was capable of doing that the whole time. I just chose not to. What else am I choosing not to do that I am capable of doing if I applied myself and I'm willing to go through that friction or discomfort and really commit to it? Where else am I just leaving potential just
on the table,
left to dry, And like, to be quite frank with you, to be quite frank with you, right after that, I got such a dopamine hit and I would go tell people about it. People were like, oh, you did what? And so I lived off of that dopamine hit for like 6 months. I'm like, yeah, I did this, I did that, They're like, wow, that's great. I was now getting unearned dopamine because I was living off of an accomplishment, telling people what I did do, not what I was currently doing. And so what I realized as I got close to the end of the year was like, man, I really do feel best when I'm challenging myself and I'm moving my body. Those two things correlate with each other. Our body releases chemicals when we move it. It's called endorphins. It's designed perfectly. God didn't miss when he created the human body, but you can't get those same endorphins and that dopamine sitting around. And so I'm like,
it's all earned.
And I was an athlete too. And I was like, man, like when I look back on my days as a baseball player, when I was young, I stopped playing baseball at 14 with drugs and alcohol. But like I look back on, winning a state championship and all the things that I complained about are now the things that I reflect back on and have fond memories of. I hated going to practice, but now I'm like, man, I wish I could go to practice with the boys and go hit baseballs and, and run laps and train. And like, that's when I was really feeling best, is when I was an athlete. And I'm like, well, I don't have to be on a sports team to be an athlete. I can build a life around this. And so I decided in December that I was going to start the year with 75 hard, January 1st of 2022. And I had did it once before. And so I was like, that's how I'm going to go into the year. I need this challenge. I need to move my body. I need to be putting good information in through my reading, hydrating well, all of those things. And I did the same thing. I said, I'm going to do it for 100 days. But then after 100 days, I was like, I'm feeling really good. Most people do 75 hard on day 76.
Yeah.
Burgers, pizza, beer, whatever, blow it out. They go back right to who they were before they started. And I'm like, well, really, what's the point of 75 hard? I believe it's to show you what you're capable of when you actually have structure, you have discipline, yes. You have a strategy, your day is planned out, how much more productive that you could be when you have those things. It's kind of like your guardrails. It's going to keep you where you need to be. And so I really liked that. And then I thought, like, well, I'm not going to do 75 hard for a full year, but I'm going to work out twice a day. I'm going to drink a gallon of water, and I'm going to read every day. I'm going to just do it for a full year because I feel too good. And I don't want to go back to the version of me in December that was kind of getting back to a low spot again. Complacent, Yeah, I seen success, but I really wasn't pushing myself. I wasn't chasing friction or challenges anymore. And so a year came and went. And then on the year mark, Andy Frisella says, show me your last 1,000 days and I'll show you why you are where you are. And so I thought, man, I'm just not ready to stop this. So I committed to doing 1,000 days in a row. And that was, the ending date was supposed to be September 28th of 2024. And I ended up doing it for 3 years straight. But as I was approaching year 2, I had to call myself out. It became a lifestyle. It became easy. It became normal. And I said, I wanted to do 1,000 days because I wanted that friction. I wanted to meet that version of me that could withstand this for 1,000 days, but I'm really not pushing it anymore. I can go lift. It's just part of who you are because you've done it for so long. Yeah. I can do it in my sleep at this point. Yeah. And so it was September. So I had about 4-month runway to hit my 2-year mark. And I said, I need to push myself again. This isn't doing what I created it to do anymore. And so I said, what if I can run 10 miles a day for all of 2024? And my mind said immediately, dude, there's no way. And then I was like, well, that's cool, because if I can pull it off, I can prove to myself that I'm capable of doing things that I didn't even think I was capable of. So let's give it a shot. I got the heckler coming up in my mind, he wasn't like, yeah, you can do it. The cheerleader wasn't,
cheerleader was
clocked in
over
at
there.
that point, must have been on vacation or whatever. So I immediately started running 5 miles a day as a part of one of my workouts of the two workouts each day. Then 2 weeks later, bumped it up to 5.5, 2.5 weeks later, 6, 6.5, 7. Just, I had that 4-month runway that I had to figure out how to get up to 10 miles a day. And January 1st of 2024, started doing the 10 miles a day as well as my lifting. And then, so I did that for all of 2024, finished my 3 years of doing the 2-a-days every single day. And then the last year was the 10 miles. It got to December again, and I was like, it's over. I set a goal so long. I've heard people say get lost in the process. I've never really been able to do that. So I wanted to set a goal that was so big that I can't think about it. I just had to be forced to think about today.
Yeah.
And get really, truly lost in the process, because trying to wrap your mind around 3 years of doing, or 1,000 days of doing something is just too big. You get overwhelmed when you think about the big picture, And I'm in December and I'm like, am I just going to go back to what was? Like, I've now set a standard of doing 2 days. I run 10 miles a day. And then here comes a download late December. Well, I'm middle of a run alone, no headphones, no podcast, no, just me with me and God. And I was given a download. Look up the world record for the most half marathons in a row. I stopped my run right there, Googled most half marathons, saw it was 235 days. I just did 10 miles a day for a year. I can do that.
It's only 3 more miles a day.
It's only 3 more miles a day.
And when you're at 10, 3 miles isn't that far away.
You wouldn't think, but I didn't think until I got into it. And I'm like, whoa, I feel those 3 miles now. A couple of months into it, it was really, really dark and brutal. Because before I was inching it up like a half a mile every 2 weeks, and I just straight jumped 30-something% increase, just boom, just really, really quick. So I went to Guinness Book of World Record, put in an application. They approved it, but they approved it for like March 23rd of 2025 to start. So I kept running the 10 miles a day just to stay healthy, stay fit, never took a day off, and then started that. Now I'm 307 days into the world record, but you know, I mean.
So what was the world record?
It was 235, but about 60 days into it, somebody broke it and it changed to 555. So I was only planning on doing it for a year. So that quickly got adjusted as I was staring at a computer screen with the 555, wondering, do I continue? Do I keep going down this path? And I just was like, I can't make a decision when I'm at this extreme low. I know I can make a bad choice in a moment like this where there's something external that happened and I become reactive to it rather than doing what's best for me.
Or resisted to it.
Exactly. You know, and so I was like, I'm just going to give it a few days, keep on it, you know. And then I got upset and I got frustrated and I got angry at this guy. And then I created him as an enemy. Like, how dare you make me feel this way? You put me in a low spot. I'm going to take what you got. That's now going to be mine. And so I was like, okay, I'll do 600 days. No big deal. You know, almost double what I expected, but we'll do it. And then just the other day, I got beat again. You know, it's now at 602. And
because you don't know who's doing it while they're doing it until they beat it.
Yeah, I don't. But that shows you right there how many unforeseen things that might feel defeating will happen to you on a path to something great, something better.
How often does the finish line move further and further away?
Yeah, the goalpost, like that's the thing is I really started to think about it. Is like, did I really set a goal to run a half marathon a day for 365 days, or did I set a goal to break a world record? The goal was to break a world record. So why am I creating these false benchmarks? I'm going to just settle in, get lost in the process, make it a part of my lifestyle. I'll evaluate where I'm at, 2 years into the process. If somebody else breaks it, I'll keep going, whatever. The commitment is there, and I plan on owning the world record. But for me, I was talking to somebody this morning. I said, what a blessing it was that they did that, because if I looked up the world record and it said 602, I probably wouldn't have pursued it.
Like, oof.
The fact that it said 235, it felt like it was in reach. It got me started. It moved me in that direction. And then when I was in that process of doing that, then that happened. Again. So
well, they were creating more friction for you, just like you like.
I found them on social media both times and sent them a message and said, congratulations. I know what you went through. You have all my respect, but I'm on day whatever. So what you have is temporary, and enjoy it while you have it, because I need to create these situations, that accountability piece. I told him I'm coming to take it, and I need to honor that.
Yeah.
And one guy even said, thank you for forcing me to find a better version of myself, a more committed version. That's exactly what I needed. And I was talking to somebody this morning, one of my video guys, and he's like, man, I heard about that. He's up in Salt Lake, and he's like, I'm sorry. And I said, I'm not. Because the 235 set something that I thought was attainable and doable. So I started. Then it went to 555. And I was like, okay, I can do that. And then it went to 602. And I said, but think about it. What if I would have only done it for a year, and then somebody comes in behind me and does 555, and I spent a year of my life and somebody came and took that away 3, 4, 5 months later?
You'd have been pissed.
They're blessing me by pushing it back so far that by the time I do 2 years plus, the next person that views that's like, no, thank you.
Yeah.
They're forcing me to set such a high standard that the likelihood of me, once I own the world record and actually having it for a long time, is much greater, because the number's much greater.
Yeah.
So they're doing me a favor. And I told him, I said, in hindsight, it's actually a good thing. And he said, hindsight, it just happened the other day. And I said, the version of me 5 to 10 years from now will look back and say, I'm happy that happened. So sometimes I future project the version of me 5 or 10 years down the road. And if you're in domestic violence or this, that, future project, where do you want that version of you 5 to 10 years down the road to be? Start making decisions that align with that. Do you still want to be in that situation? Do you still want those same fears or frustrations or doubts, or, you know, or do you want a clear sheet of paper where even though you don't know what to draw, it's still up to you to draw whatever you want when you decide what it is that you do want to draw, right? And that's how we really create a life. I believe that my job is to live a life that, like, I put myself in a situation to run a half marathon a day, but then I look at myself as somebody else that's just experiencing it. And I'm like, how lucky am I to be able to experience running a half marathon every day, and I get to take all this in, and I get to learn all these lessons, and there's so much beauty in all of the pain, and
you get to learn more about yourself and your determination and who you are and what you're capable of. And
exactly,
once you reach that goal of the 600 and whatever, 700, whatever you decide it to be, then you get to find the next thing. Then you get to level up in another area of your life, because you just proved beyond a doubt that you're capable of way more than you thought you were when you started your journey.
75 hard turned into, 100 days that turned into a year, that turned into 1,000 days, that turned into 3 years, that ended up turning into a world record. So the reason why
it's turned into a lifestyle.
Absolutely. But what that says is one small commitment.
Yep.
A 75-day commitment changed the entire direction of my life to the point to where now I'm breaking a world record.
That's
a matter of, 3 years later or 4 years later.
Yeah.
And so that's how big just one decision, one commitment. Everybody is just one away from a completely different life.
That's awesome.
Everybody.
It's true.
And I've morphed into multiple people through my life, and I'm a big believer we should kill this version of us every 3 to 5 years and recreate. Stop taking this version of you that you don't like, that's unhappy with you, into next year, and then the next year, and then the next decade. That's a surefire recipe for failure in the one thing that we have called life. Yeah. And
you don't realize your capabilities until you push yourself like this.
Yeah.
I guarantee you 5 years ago, if someone told you were going to run a marathon a day for 700 days, you would have said,
that's impossible.
No, I'm not. I hate running. I'm not running.
Yeah. Without a doubt. But that's exactly what I needed. And the only reason why I hated running is because it was hard and it was uncomfortable. So we avoid the hard. We avoid the uncomfortable.
But that's where the true beauty lies. That's where the most growth I've ever had in my life is through the hardest, most uncomfortable, most brutal, low times in my life.
It doesn't feel like that while you're going through it. But on the other side, you can look back because you have hindsight now.
Well, sometimes it does, because I was in an abusive relationship, and it did feel like I didn't recognize myself, because I wasn't raised in a situation where I should be comfortable with abuse.
Yeah.
But it came on so slowly that by the time I realized what it was, I was in it. And I'm like, how did I get here?
It's almost like my addiction.
Who am I? Yeah.
Started with a little innocent chunk of a pill.
Right.
And then next thing you know, you're so far deep that you don't even recognize yourself anymore. And then you're chasing
something that's unattainable, because it's not something that's good for you. It's not something that's...
Do you think that people in those type of situations, that when you say chasing something, do you think that they're chasing validation and they're looking for validation from the wrong person that happens to be abuser or narcissist or whatever, but we're looking to them for, love and care and acceptance, and we're looking in all the wrong places rather than really showing you that you love, care, and respect yourself by not tolerating that type of a situation, right?
But also sometimes when you're in it, it's like putting a frog in a pot and then turning the pot on. Yeah. You don't realize how bad it is till it's almost too late. Not too late, but till you're deep in it.
You're cooked.
And
you got to figure it out.
And so then you have to figure out, how do I get out? And then once you're out, you have to figure out, okay, now how do I heal from all of this?
Well, you're probably a pretty burned frog at that point.
You are.
And you're going to have to go through some healing.
Sometimes you're barely alive.
And then you got to go through the healing process, probably before progress process,
But through that healing process, like for me, I learned a lot about myself when I could forgive the person who abused me. because in my mind, if I forgive him, he gets a free pass. But my mom told me, if you forgive him, you get to move on. He has no idea your struggles right now because he's out of your life.
Yeah.
But if you forgive him, you get to move on. And then that opens you up to the next best thing for yourself.
Yeah.
I mean, I've had a lot of things in my life that have been challenging, but I'm fortunate enough that I had people around me to help encourage me to not take it as, oh, this is who you are and this is what you're going to be the rest of your life, but to tell me, what are you going to do now?
Yeah.
So this happened. Now what?
Yeah, some of those life-altering questions.
My dad was
what are you gonna do now?
Always the now what guy.
Yeah, where you're got to be like, he's basically, here's the mirror. Look at it and figure it out. Go inside.
So
like, what are you going to do?
Every time you level up, you're telling yourself and the people that are watching, because some people are always watching, that was her. Now I'm here. I'm capable of more too. So keep watching because I'm going to keep going.
Yeah.
And I'm capable of whatever I can imagine I'm capable of.
Yeah.
I'm limited by my own self, and that is it.
Life is great when you're growing.
Yes.
You know, life gets pretty bleak and dim and dull and dark and gray. If when you're stagnant and you're not growing, what happens to water that's just sits? It gets bacteria. What happens to water that's flowing and that's moving? Yeah. You know, it stays fresh. And, you know, I'm a big believer in that. I'm a big believer that, again, God didn't miss when he created the human design. I just believe that we're, you know, making bad decisions that put us in situations or circumstances that sometimes feel like we can't get out of, which is untrue. That's a lie that your brain is telling you. You could put yourself in any situation, any environment, and become anybody that you want to become within a 1 to 2, 3 year time frame. I've changed my life over and over and over and over. And, you know, from being, you know, broken poor to drug addict to successful millionaire to then down and out because money didn't solve all my problems to, you know, running and, you know, like I've redesigned my life so many times. And if you're down and out and things look really, really gray, that is your body and your brain saying, change.
Yep.
Do something different. Your midlife crisis is more of like a midlife calling. I wouldn't even call it a crisis. It's a calling for you to change and for you to level up and do something different. That's what that feeling is there for. It's signaling you to do something different. Are you listening to the signal? Like, you have all the data on the decisions and the environments that you're in. Do you like it? If the answer is no, something's got to change. What are you going to do?
Thank you so much for your time, Trevor. Your story is amazing.
Yeah.
I love, love, love stories of triumph. I mean, you've done it all, which is beautiful.
Not yet.
Well,
by the time they put me 6 feet, I hope to, just on my headstone. He did it all. He did it all.
From drugs and alcohol to full-on success to always pushing yourself to be better and greater. And I think that's the best lesson that we can learn is to never give up on ourselves and know that there's always something better on the other side of a challenge or difficulty. So thank you for your time, Trevor, and much success to you. Much more success in I'm not talking about financial, I'm talking about in your pursuits to better yourself every single day, because it's an inspiration. And where can people find you on social media so they can follow you? You can just find me on Instagram, Trevor Lee Cowley, or on Facebook, Trevor Cowley. I do have if you're a business owner, I have a podcast called Real Business Owners that just it's really personal development, because I believe that our results can't outperform who we are, right? If you're constantly growing, the results that you experience in life have no other option but to grow with you, right? And so usually we want the result, and so we're chasing the result, but we're not turning ourselves into the person worthy of that result. So that's the friction that's stopping you. So it was awesome. Thank you for calling me. Thank you for having me on. Absolutely. It was fun. Thank you so much. Yeah. And if any of you want to follow him, ask him any questions, I'm sure he'd be willing to answer. Always remember that you're greater than who you are right now, and your potential is limitless. Just push yourself. And like he says, create that friction so that you can change and become the next best version of yourself. Have a wonderful, beautiful day. God bless.